的声音呢，Can it prove through the night that the flag was still there? Oh, say the stars are sprinkled, then not yet wave. Oh, the land of the free and the home of the brave.
10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me. This is Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I am here with you on No Sound Bites Allowed. I hope everyone is having a great day. Now, when you're seeing this, this will be broadcast on August 21st in the morning, but it's actually being taped on August 20th at night. And in case anyone wonders, the reason why you see me often in the black shirt here, that's because I just came from work or I'm about to go to work. Because I work a 9 to 5, just like you, 9, 11 hours a day. So I'm working and trying to get out the stories to you. So I do appreciate each and every one of you that do take the time out of your busy day to watch what I'm doing, because I appreciate it. I understand. I work too. But speaking about that, speaking of appreciation, deep appreciation of what you have been doing and what's been going on, is I've gotten a lot of reactions to...
My real objection is that...
I'm sorry, hit the wrong one. Has been to the Antifa does the fringe left. Antifa does the fringe left have no shame. It was an article I put out just about a day, 24, 48 hours ago. And I've been seeing a lot of reaction, and that's just one of the places that I've been seeing so much of a reaction. On Facebook, there's been a huge reaction as well, and I'm very appreciative of all of that. And I'm going to explain in this video some of the reactions I've been receiving, some of the reactions we've seen from people like Representative Dan Crenshaw, some of the reactions from what we've seen in Hong Kong, what we're seeing with Andy Ngo, with Pierce Morgan. And of course, your comments, because your comments mean a lot to me. Because for every person that does speak out, I think there are hundreds, maybe thousands, probably tens of thousands of people who believe exactly what you believe, who want to say the same thing you are saying, but they're worried. In this culture that we have going on, in this environment we have, especially with social media, far too many people feel like they can't say anything because they're going to be attacked. I know I get attacked from time to time because I'm a black Republican, and you should hear some of the things that people say to me. Well, you can imagine them. A lot of racial slurs, a lot of really stupid comments. But I'm not going to be cowed by that. I'm not going to back down, and I hope you aren't either. And this is to celebrate some of your thoughts that you've been sharing with me. So let me get right into it, because this isn't going to be a long video. But, and I want to preface this. You know, I was talking to people yesterday, Monday, locally in my region here in upstate New York. And I have several people who come up to me. Many people know I'm a political commentator. I've been doing this for 12 years. I speak to many politicians throughout, in Congress, in the state, in the federal government, the local government. So often people will come up and have conversations with me from the left, from the far left, libertarians, conservatives, Republicans as well. And I had a gentleman telling me how much he was excited about the news that there is going to be a recession. Taking the news that there might be a recession, that some economists are saying that they expect there could be a recession in 2 years. And he was ecstatic. He was happy to hear this, to hear like Bill Maher, that, yeah, there's going to be, if there's a recession, people are going to be hurt, but Donald Trump will lose the 2020 election. That's the mindset. And I have to tell you, When I posed that to him, when I asked this gentleman, and I won't name him because I don't want him to get ostracized for this, but when I asked him very directly, well, then you're saying, like Bill Maher, that you're happy that people will lose their jobs, they will lose their homes, that people will be financially hurt if there is a recession, if there is a recession. And his answer was, yes, I will. And just because he wants to see Donald Trump, someone he doesn't personally like, to see him lose an election, he is willing to put you at financial risk, to allow you to lose your home, your jobs, to go into debt, just so that he could enjoy to see a victory politically because he doesn't personally like the president. And that's something that we hear a lot. And that is what I think we're seeing in the reaction with what Antifa is doing, what the fringe left is doing. People like Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, otherwise known as PLOT, what people like Citizen Action, the fringe far left. They're very vocal. They're very violent. And we're hearing them speaking up more and more, but we're not hearing the counter. And I think it's very important because we're seeing people in China who are out there and they are fighting for the very same freedoms that people like Antifa are saying we need to get rid of. This is incredible, the dichotomy, the difference that we're seeing out there. And I want you to understand what we're talking about here, because I want you to see something. And I'm going to try and make this short, but I want you to see something. This is from the Washington Post. This was on August 11th. And the article, for those who are listening to this audio, protesters shut down Hong Kong's airport as China warns of terrorism, raising fears of military crackdown. And again, that's from the Washington Post. But in there, they have a video. And in the article, the portion of the article I'm going to be quoting here is, Monday's protest came in response to a sharp increase in the level of force employed by Hong Kong's embattled police. Hours before airport shut down, 2 police officers elsewhere in the city pinned a black-clad demonstrator to the concrete, one officer's knee pressing the young man's face into a pool of his own blood. Quote, "I've already been arrested," the man yelled as he cried for help. "Don't do this. I'm begging you," end quote. And here's the video of that. Now, something that you need to understand, and this is courtesy of the Hong Kong Free Press. You notice the guy in the video with the yellow hat? He's not a police officer. He's not involved. He is, and you'll see in the video right here, he is putting his knee on the man's face. Now, you don't need to see the rest of the video. You can, of course. But what that shows us is that the Hong Kong police, love them, hate them, whatever, that's not the important part. The guy in the yellow hat is essentially the equivalent of Antifa here. This is an individual who is beating down on individuals in his country who have already submitted, but he doesn't like them. He doesn't like what they're saying and what they stand for. And you know where we've seen something just like that? Where someone in their own little uniform, and the yellow hats in China signify the support of the communist government. Well, we've seen that before. And we've seen a very similar image. And I'm going to show you what that image is right here, because I showed it to you in my other video. And that's here. This is Andy Ngo. He's a conservative, but he's also a reporter. And this is him covering how a middle-aged man was maced and beaten by Antifa mobs. I'm quoting his Twitter feed. He was knocked unconscious to the ground. His partner or spouse was trying to protect him as mob still surrounded them. No police. # Portland protests. And that was on August 17th at 2:51 p.m. Do you see that? And tell me that doesn't look exactly like what we saw in China, where the communists were sitting, kneeling, putting their knee into a man's face who was already subdued, while police officers were trying to arrest him. And that's what we see from Antifa. The pro-communist, the guy in the yellow hat, is the same thing as the protesters in Portland, the Antifa protesters, using violence because they don't like someone speaking up and saying something that they don't agree with, that they don't feel is right. Remember, we've heard this many times. The far left is very much involved in how do they feel. If they feel it's right, then it must be right. We've heard that from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. We've heard that from even Joe Biden, who's supposed to be the moderate. And you've seen my video, hopefully, on that, on both of them as well. You know, with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez talking about 60 Minutes, and we're seeing Joe Biden saying truth versus facts. That's what Democrats should be voting on, looking for. They're looking for feelings. And that should terrify people because, you know, there's somewhere between 1.2 million, 128,000 to 1.2 million people have been reported there just this weekend were assembling in Hong Kong to try and get the same exact freedom of speech that I am exercising right now, that you are exercising in seeing this video. And what many people have exercised when they have come out and they have made comments to me. And when they're making comments on our videos. And it's important that you do comment. Because not only are you representing hundreds, maybe thousands of other people, but you're encouraging people to use their First Amendment right and defeating people like Antifa, people like Progressive Leaders of Tomorrow, otherwise known as PLOT, people like Citizen Action and Indivisible New York, and all their iterations across the country, this fringe group that are using intimidation to try and silence people. And I want to commend some people like Stephen Wolf, who made a comment, and he said on Facebook, "When I observed the cowardly POS strike the victim on his head, I immediately thought if a police officer had done that, he would have been fired and probably prosecuted. Officers are trained to never use head strikes." I want to thank Suzanne Nelson for her comment that they are domestic terrorists and should be treated as such. I want to thank Bobby Tao. I regard to Antifa as a terrorist group and will treat them accordingly. I want to thank Marcos Medilitili. I apologize if I'm sure I got that wrong. When he says Antifa stands for anti-fascist. Now seriously, who are the real terrorists? There's the First Amendment right to an opinion, and then there's terrorism. Propaganda and slick rhetoric won't change the facts about racism, hate groups, and white nationalists. Maybe more people should look up the definition of fascism and see who it applies to. And Paul Schell, Antifa is just a name. They are the very definition of fascism. Gentlemen, ladies, I agree with you all. You are correct. I believe it's absolutely true that we're seeing Antifa do the same thing that the yellow hats, the communists in China, are doing. They are oppressing people to hold down their voices, to deny them the ability to speak, to deny them the freedom that we enjoy every day, that the gentlemen at the very beginning of this video were singing about. Because America and our American flag is a symbol of the freedom that everyone around the world wishes they had, and very few do get to enjoy, especially without fear of retribution. Because China is about to, the Chinese military has surrounded Hong Kong. They have hundreds, and I say this again, hundreds of personnel carriers, of military vehicles, and military in general, military soldiers who are prepared to go into Hong Kong. It is a show of force to silence people and to not allow them to speak. And how is that any different than when we see with Andy Ngo, and he's showing us how the very
My real objection.
That's wrong one. The very same people are beating down on innocents. Look at this guy. You know what? Maybe he disagreed. Maybe he said a word or two, but guess what? This man is knocked out, and he was later taken by police, who did eventually show up and was carried to an ambulance with a police escort, while all those figures you see in the background, those are dozens of people who chased after them, following them and the police, just as this man is trying to get medical attention. And I got to tell you, that scares me. That scares me a lot. And it's not like we haven't seen that this was coming. And I want to play for you, and you saw the video, I've hit it by accident a couple of times. I want you to realize this is something we have seen coming. Not only has Jordan Peterson spoken about it, but Stephen Fry, a member of the left, spoke about this very clearly. And I want to play that right now.
My real objection is that I don't think political correctness works. I want to get to the Golden Hill, but I don't think that's the way to get there. I believe one of the greatest human failings is to prefer to be right than to be effective. And political correctness is always obsessed with how right it is without thinking of how effective it might be. I wouldn't class myself as...
And think about that. Stephen Fry, a member of the left, a self-acknowledged voice of the left, a gay man, is out there speaking about the left wanting to be right, that they just want to be able to enforce their feelings, that they say that this is the truth and you have no choice on it. And they don't want to hear the comments. They don't want to see you comment on this video on Facebook, on Periscope, on Twitter, on YouTube. They want you to think that there is no one else speaking about this and that they control the media, they control the airwaves, and they control your life. And I disagree with that. Not only do I disagree with it, so does Representative Dan Crenshaw. And I want to share with you his thoughts about this from also August 17th, the same day that Andy Ngo is showing us how Antifa beat up on individuals. And there are many videos out there, if you look for them, that still exist that are showing how Antifa was roving around in mobs, attacking individuals one by one and in twos, just because they didn't like what someone had to say, and intimidated the police enough in Portland for them to leave and leave the public undefended, which is another thing I'm upset about. But let me go to what we see with Dan Crenshaw. Dan Crenshaw, Representative Dan Crenshaw of Texas, said, quote, "In Hong Kong, anti-fascists wave American flags, demand freedom, and actually fight fascists. In Portland, anti-fascists burn American flags, demand violence in the name of socialism. Portland is a sad showing of where we are today, all around." Also, yes, obviously Greenland, but by Greenland, I don't care about that part. But more importantly is what Dan Crenshaw is saying. There's our difference. And I think a lot of people agree with that. And I've seen it, and I just put out the three or four comments I showed you there. That's part of dozens of comments that I've received across many, many Facebook posts where people were pointing out, hey, I agree. It's one thing to have a protest. It's an entirely different thing to go out there and to beat people into submission. That's not the First Amendment. What is the fringe far left? What are they really supporting? And you know what's sad? Most people didn't hear that Dan Crenshaw made his comments while we saw what was happening in Portland, the violence that was going on, the submission, the authoritarian and totalitarian actions. Yes, the fascist actions of Antifa and the far left. And you didn't hear all of the other politicians. Where was Nancy Pelosi denouncing this? Where were the 2020 Democrats denouncing the violence from Antifa when they attack other people for voicing an opinion? Where are those comments? Because you know what? The left doesn't want to talk about that. They don't want to get involved in that because you might have to make a decision And that decision might be that the Democratic Party being taken over by the Democratic Socialists and the far fringe left is not in your best interest. And I think a lot of people in their comments, not just the ones I showed, but the many others I'm not showing, and the many conversations I have, people are saying, you know what, Mike, you're right. I think most people don't agree with the far left member and individual that I spoke with on Monday night. I don't think most people want the nation in a recession just so that the far left can feel good about finally winning an election. I don't think Americans think like that. I don't think they want other Americans to be put into poverty, to lose their homes, to lose their jobs, just so a fringe political group can say, hey, we won. I don't think that's what most Americans think. I don't think most Americans would accept that you have to force people with violence to be able to believe what you believe. You know, I've talked to I don't know how many people of every political party, and I have many friends in every single political party. I rely on them in doing my job here and speaking. And guess what? Very often we don't agree. They don't attack me. I don't attack them. That's not necessary. But I want to end this with another thought, something that I think is also very important, because it's not just you and me. It's not just what we think we're hearing, okay? It's a lot more than that. And I want to be able to show you something. This is from Piers Morgan. He spoke on with Ben Shapiro.
Liberal.
Whoops.
Let's be honest.
Hang on.
Get what they...
I want this to be, sorry. Yeah, it's said at the right time. So I want you to hear what Piers Morgan had to say about the far left, about liberals, which he includes in it is himself as being part of. And you can see this. This is from Real Clear Politics, which reported on, and I'm going to show it to you in 1 second. There it is. Piers Morgan, populism is rising because liberals have become unbearable. And this is from the Ben Shapiro show, and I'm starting at minute 42 and 8 seconds, but you can see the entire thing yourself to make your own decision. But this is what a liberal, Piers Morgan, who has to say about liberalism.
They want, democracy dies.
So what do you make of the broader argument that's been made about Brexit and President Trump as part of the same generalized phenomenon that you're seeing in other countries in Europe as well? You've seen it in Italy. You're starting to see it in some of the Nordic countries, that there is a resistance to a generalized elite, people who want to control your life from top down, who may not take, who may sneer at you. It seems to me that
populism is rising because liberals have become unbearable. And I speak as a liberal, okay? In my core, I'm probably more liberal than not. Although fundamentally, I see myself as a journalist and I'd like to see both sides of all these things. And I can argue both. But liberals have become utterly, pathetically illiberal. And it's a massive problem. What's the point of calling yourself a liberal if you don't allow anyone else to have a different view? You know, this snowflake culture that we now operate in, the victimhood culture, everyone has to think a certain way, behave a certain way. Everyone has to, have a bleeding heart and tell you 20 things that are wrong with them. And I just think it's all completely skewed to an environment where everyone's offended by everything. And no one's allowed to say a joke. If you said a joke 10 years ago that offended somebody, you can never host the Oscars, So now there's no host for anything. The Emmys now just said they're not going to have a host either. So hosts have gone. And soon every award winner will go because everyone's a human and they're all flawed. So no one can win awards anymore because there will be no platform before they even get on the podium. So then no hosts, no stars. Then no one can make any movies because we're all flawed. So no actors. Right? So suddenly, where are we? The liberals get what they want, which is a humorless void where nothing happens, where no one dare do anything or laugh about anything or behave in any way that doesn't suit their rigid way of leading a life. No thanks. So what's happening around the world? Populism is rising because people are fed up with the PC culture. They're fed up with snowflakery. They're fed up with everyone being offended by everything. And they're gravitating to forceful personalities who go, this is all nonsense, which, by the way, it is in most cases. So why are we surprised? I'm not surprised. It doesn't mean to say that I agree with a lot of it, but it means I can understand it. And I understand why the liberals, my side, if you like, are getting it so horribly wrong. They just want to tell people not just how to lead their lives, but if you don't lead it the way I tell you to. You know, it's a kind of version of fascism. If you don't lead the life the way I'm telling you to, then I'm going to ruin your life. I'm going to scream abuse at you. I'm going to get you fired from your job. I'm going to get you hounded by your family and friends. I'm going to make you the most disgusting human being in the world because you said a joke 10 years ago. And that's the attitude we're now operating in. It takes forceful personalities to rise above it. Donald Trump rose up and went like Godzilla. Okay, you want to fight? I'm here. And guess what? Millions of people in Middle America went, that's our guy. That's our guy. He's the one that's going to help us. Same thing happening across Europe.
All right. And see, that's an important thing to hear. Europe understands the same thing that Americans understand. Millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans understand. And I think that number is an underestimation. I think there are hundreds of millions of Americans, and I think there are thousands, maybe tens of thousands of the fringe far left. Antifa may have a stronghold in the state of Washington or in the state of California, and sadly, in the state of New York. But they don't control the United States. They don't speak for the United States. As much as Tom Perez, the chair of the Democratic National Committee, would like to make people believe that the democratic socialism of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is taking over, as much as Alan Yang thinks he can buy people by saying, hey, I'm going to give you free money, that doesn't exist. That can only happen if he taxes everyone to death. Yeah, they may want to say that. Maybe Joe Biden thinks he needs to appeal to the far left by saying, I believe in truth versus facts, so that he can be just like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Maybe that's what they think wins. Maybe that's what they think freedom is. The First Amendment is the right to say something that they agree with. But in fact, the First Amendment is you have the freedom to speak. And you know what? Your speech is protected just because someone doesn't like it. As long as you're not inciting violence, as long as you're not actively telling something that's not true, you get to say it, because that is freedom. And that's why people in Hong Kong are fighting their government, a massive government, and they have 1 million people coming out to say, no, we don't agree. And you know what? We need to say that on YouTube. We need to say that on Facebook. We need to say that on Twitter, on all social media. I hope you make a comment, whether you agree with me or not, whether you agree what I have shown you or not, and the arguments I have made or not. Don't attack, but tell me. If you think I'm wrong, say it. If you think I'm right, say it. Because we need people to be active. We need people to be involved. This is our nation. We are involved in it. This is our lives. And we should say that we denounce violence like Antifa. We should say that you cannot intimidate people into believing what you believe, and that is not the First Amendment, and it is not protected by the First Amendment, and we stand against it. I hope more people will say that. I hope to have more reactions. I hope that I will be able to spend the time showing you dozens upon dozens of comments. I'm not the biggest person on YouTube. I understand that. But I hope that saying we will stand up against that, against oppression, and we will be Americans with our